And there was a time in this country, a long time ago, when reading wasn't just for fags, and neither was writing. People wrote books and movies that had stories, so you cared whose ass it was and why it was farting, and I believe that time can come again.
Hello. Thanks for tuning in this week to the Think Liberty podcast. In case you forgot, since I've been gone for about a month now, I'm Caitlin, your host. I apologize for the break and hope you didn't miss us too much. I'm joined this week by Amos Joseph, the host of the 10K Rum podcast. How are you? You haven't been on in a while.
Been doing all right. Been really, really busy. I worked 68 hours last week and...
Oh my.
Yeah, just got really exhausted and yeah. So been busy with that and also with the podcast as well. So
yeah, how's your podcast going?
It's going well. We're definitely, with the new name and everything, that's going well. We have a big guest that's supposed to be coming on this month.
I am excited for this big guest that will remain unnamed. But
yeah, it's because
I know who it is, and I'm excited.
You know who it is. Yeah, it's not quite a libertarian individual, but definitely a larger than life individual we're having on. And,
Indeed, he is.
So, but yeah, there's that to look forward to, and then we're just plugging along with the show. But thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to be back. We've been gone for, a month or so now. Well, at least I have. Matthew did his episode last week, but I moved to Ohio from Minnesota. That was a process because we didn't have much notice, moving to Ohio. We only had like three and a half weeks notice to move. So yeah, we were lucky. We got to be able to hire movers and made the whole process a lot easier. And my mom took the kids for a week, so I had the whole house to myself to move in. It was wonderful. But getting used to Ohio is an adjustment. But the good thing is I finally have my own office. The house is bigger than the one we had before, so I have my own office. I can just shut the door and forget about everything else. So silver lining in all the stress and chaos.
The official headquarters of Think Liberty.
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I'm not like the head person of Think Liberty. I'm like number 2, but still, the semi-official headquarters of Think Liberty is now in Ohio.
Start putting up banners, start getting up phone lines, hire a couple people, and it'll be like,
yeah, they can work out of my spare bedroom. I'm sure they'd love it. This week, we are joined by Charles Schaefer. Charles is running for city council in Burien, Washington. He ran for city council in 2017 and received 17% of the vote in a 5-way race. He also volunteers every week serving homeless and low-income people in his community. Charles, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll just get right into it. How did you get your start in libertarianism?
Well, let's first talk about how I got my start in politics, because that goes a little further back. When I was in high school, I was on the Teen Leadership Council here in Burien, and so I started going to city council meetings, just kind of getting involved at a local level. And about the same time, I started looking into politics kind of nationally or just at a higher level. I've always considered myself a libertarian since, I was in high school and I got involved and started understanding what the different political philosophies were. Then when I went to college, I kind of stepped back from politics a bit. And I just recently, in 2016, the Gary Johnson campaign was going on and everything. And I kind of got back involved. I'd been going off and on to city council meetings during that time, just keeping up on what was going on in Burien.
Now, Charles, which economist or philosopher would you say is your biggest influence when it comes to your political ideas?
Well, actually, economist is a good one for me because I majored in economics at the University of Washington. So I do like Hayek, of course, Mises. Rothbard, I like him, but I'm not. There's some people that are like really hardcore Rothbard, and I'm not like really hardcore.
What is it, the deontology and the dogmatism that puts you off?
A little bit, yeah. I guess I would say I'm more of a consequentialist, although I kind of walk the line, I think, between those two.
Yeah, definitely. No,
I
I
think
get that for
to be
sure.
an
The
actual
consequentialism, it kind of goes
candidate,
with
yeah.
pragmatism a bit too.
Yeah, well, to be a candidate, you kind of have to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't want their city council members lecturing them on philosophy so much.
No, really?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind it if they can make a good case. There actually is one person on the current council who's a bit of a left libertarian-ish, I guess. Maybe his dad's a libertarian, so obviously he had a good influence growing up. But he and I talk a little bit of philosophy, and we've talked about like Georgism and stuff like that.
Nice. It's not every day you find a Georgist in the wild.
I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a Georgist, but he seems to look kind of favorably on it. Like,
hey, it's a start,
sure.
You know?
Yeah.
It's under the tent of libertarian ideology, whether a lot of right libertarians want to agree with it or not, it is. So, no, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your previous run for city council. What are some things that you took away from that? And what has better prepared you for your current run?
Well, it's really interesting because I was just talking yesterday at the candidate forum about this race and how it's different than 2 years ago. And part of that is because we have 7 people on our council, and it alternates. There's 4 up one year and 3 up the next cycle. And so control of the council isn't up this year. So in 2017, it was really polarized, really ideologically charged. The candidates that made it to a general, there was a progressive slate and a conservative slate. And part of that, I think, we've really been influenced by the Trump thing. Like, all the conservative candidates have very Trump-esque ideologies, the policies, that our sanctuary city ordinance has been a big issue.
It's been, I noticed in the midterms, it was all about combating Trump or standing with Trump, because I guess Trump was still like a major news cycle, after just getting elected, the year prior. The midterms were rough.
Yeah, and certainly in Seattle, we obviously people here have strong opinions on Trump, and so we have a strong anti-Trump progressive Democratic element, but then I guess our conservatives in Burien are kind of reactionary, and they started adopting a lot of. I don't necessarily know if this was strategy on their part or if it was just this is kind of their personality. Like, they want to be really anti-immigrant, that style of conservatism.
Ew.
But anyway, that's what it turned into. And this year, it's calmed down a little bit, I think. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I'm noticing a lot more ideas are being discussed this time around instead of just being for or against Trump. It is refreshing to see. Not that I like all the ideas being discussed, but it's good to have a policy-driven discussion when it comes to elections.
Just wait till 2020, everybody.
Oh, no, I don't want to. I just want to take a nap that whole year.
Well, hopefully I'll get elected so I won't have to run next year and deal with it.
Now, Charles, what are some of the more pressing issues that you feel that are going on specifically in Burien, and then how do you want to address them? How would you want to address them?
So I think the consensus is that the 2 main issues are homelessness and public safety, and those are both kind of regional issues. They don't obviously stop at our city borders, but they certainly impact Burien. And homelessness in particular, through my volunteer work, I interact with a lot of those individuals. I actually got asked a question about this. I was in a candidate forum last night. My number one answer is zoning. And I talked about eliminating single-family zoning. Any single-family lot, you could automatically have an accessory dwelling unit, which is something that's worked in Minneapolis. And also downtown, some of the height restrictions, buildings can only be 8 stories. I think in our downtown, we have the infrastructure, we have transit. Why not allow developers to go up higher if they want to? And then public safety
down too, which is great.
Yeah, and public safety, it's one of the things that some of the conservative candidates will tell you is, we need more cops, right? That's sort of one of their staples. And to me, it seems like we don't have a lot of money, so getting more cops, like either we would have to raise taxes, which obviously isn't something I'm going to support as a liberty-respecting candidate. But I think just focusing on violent crime and gang crime, because in our region that is kind of a problem, and decriminalizing like nonviolent drug use, decriminalizing anything else, like no victim, no crime, basically. I think so. We use our existing resources. Can you do that
from a city council level? Decrim stuff.
So I can decriminalize, which we could direct our police to not enforce any nonviolent drug crime or make it a lowest enforcement priority. We can't legalize it. That would be a state or federal.
I didn't know you had that mechanism available to you as city council. The prioritization of enforcement. That's really cool.
Yeah, we can direct our police department to say, like, this is a priority, this is not a priority. We just saw that recently on the 4th of July. We have a fireworks ban, and which another thing I don't agree with, but we put a lot of emphasis on that. And like on the 4th of July, that was our priority, and the surrounding dates, that was our priority. It was just like anybody who's using fireworks, we're going to crack down on that. And obviously, we still didn't have enough resources to deal with it. I think we need another approach.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, on the 4th of July, I saw a police drone fly over the house that I was illegally shooting fireworks off at. It's funny how they enforce that stuff. It's like, you're going to give everybody a ticket?
I'm getting some South Park flashbacks here.
Well, you bring up drones. We actually had a drone that I think the Parks Department was using to survey the coastline, because we have kind of an unstable coast. We're right on the water. And apparently some of the neighbors were concerned because maybe that drone was also taking pictures of their property. Maybe not. I haven't seen the public records request. I haven't seen what happened with that. But it's certainly a concern.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to the homeless issue, well, I think zoning stuff is a fantastic way to approach it. What about, livelihoods of people that even if you rezone things, they're still not going to be able to afford these homes? So what is your suggestion to help people back up on their feet and get them to a place where they can afford property and afford to live?
So I think we have a lot of great programs already that are geared toward different aspects of homelessness. Like obviously Transform Burien, we serve meals. We have a food bank, a clothing bank, resume preparation, stuff like that. We also have Navos Mental Health Services in Burien, which helps with like the mental health aspect of it, and there are resources for people that have drug or alcohol addictions. Like, I think there are a lot of good resources that exist. And what I would say is for the city, like if the city is going to have a role, then it would be more of facilitating. And I actually applied for the Human Services Commission recently. They didn't put me on the council, and I was on the commission, and I was told the reason why was because I was running for council and there might be a conflict, which I understand that. But I've attended a few of the meetings, and I talked to some of the commissioners about that type of thing, of how can we coordinate the different, like even serving the meals. Transform Burien does, but there are other organizations that serve meals, and how can we coordinate to make sure we're not duplicating and not serving like 2 meals at the same time, so we can get the most out of our resources. That's what I would see as if the city has to have a role.
I agree fully. Central planning, as Hayek said, is not the way to go. But if, you have a smaller community on this scale, the thing you can do is trying to help facilitate resources being spread out more efficiently instead of trying to provide it all yourself. That's good.
Yeah. Well, and there's a big difference between facilitating and planning.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, like if the Human Services Commission actually, I think, provides a good forum where different service providers can come to the table and interact with each other.
Yeah, no, and I see that as a proper role of a local government if there's going to be one. And let's be honest, even if we achieve anarchy, there's still going to be local governments. And that's a good way they can do it.
Exactly.
So Burien is adjacent to Seattle. Are you facing the same issues with minimum wage hikes? What would you do on city council to address the demand for higher living wage?
So it's interesting because Seattle went to $15 an hour, and SeaTac, which is the city which contains the airport, is also $15. Except they have some exemptions. So I'm not sure if people who are working in the airport actually get the $15 an hour. It's kind of weird. But that hasn't really been a big issue in Burien, partially because after those were enacted, the state enacted a bill which is going to phase in a minimum wage eventually statewide. So the city cannot enact anything that's less than what the state has. We could go higher. There's one candidate who's running for council right now who's talked about going higher, but I don't see that having the political capital to pass. So we're just stuck with what the state law is.
Man, that is unfortunate that they went to a state level on that instead of locality.
Now, I know you mentioned a little earlier, Charles, you're talking about like the sort of the left and the right in Seattle. Now, being in that area, I mean, it's probably just become a bit of just the stereotype, but are there really more kind of leftists or Democrats than there are sort of people more on the right-leaning side in that area?
There are. I would say it's probably about 2-1 if you just want to break everything down left, right.
Right.
Like
Now,
in my city, like Hillary Clinton, Obama, both are polling or both got vote totals in like the mid 60s.
okay.
So
with that, though, with pretty much that area is either Democrat or Democratic Socialist, do you see there's any real like place that could where libertarianism can have a seat at the table and really basically spread the cause for liberty?
I'm really optimistic that Burien is that place, actually. And it's interesting, when I first started getting involved in local politics, I guess, tend to, I don't know if maybe I lean a little bit more to the left, or maybe my messaging is just better oriented toward the left, which in a place like this works out well for me. But I had had several people tell me over the course of my political history, you're not what we expected a libertarian would be. We thought libertarians were just like, oh, you hate the poor people, want to get rid of all taxes, which, I mean, I do want to get rid of all taxes, but I don't lead with that. But like just having an actual compassionate approach about saying, hey, I volunteer every week. Hey, let's look at how the private sector can address these problems. And I don't know. So whatever I'm doing, it's apparently working.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. I know it's tricky. Like there is a bit of an alliance for most libertarians. From what I see, kind of you have these like conservatarians. So you'll get some right wing people that agree with you on a lot. But to really try to work with the left, I know it can be really tricky depending upon what you lead with and how you're perceived. Like, especially when you said with the whole taxes thing,
Yeah.
taxation is theft.
I would say that each candidate should work in. First of all, they should be true to like what their beliefs actually are, and so if someone is on the more conservative side, although I don't know, I grew up attending church. I consider myself kind of socially conservative in a way, but just looking at the issues in Burien and the fact that the conservatives here don't stand for fiscal conservatism or small government or anything that I would agree with them on. So I've just been working with the people that will work with me and, working in my political context that I'm in. Like if someone's in, say, Montana, and they're going to run as a libertarian, I would say, yeah, you should probably try to be friendly with the conservatives. Appealing to Democrats isn't going to do you good out there.
Right. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Because it at least in my experience, it gets really tricky. I guess me personally, I tend, just because I was raised more on the right myself too, and I do have a bit of a religious background, that I tend to have a hard time really trying to get across to more left-leaning individuals, because I don't know. It's I guess there's
Because it's
something
a foreign
there
concept
that
to you.
to them or to me.
You don't, or to you, leftism. So it's hard to connect with people who you don't have that foundational, I guess, empathy with.
Yeah. And then of course, I mean,
I came from the left, so like I connect with people on the left a lot better than people on the right, because those concepts are so foreign to me. Like those were never my values, so I don't know.
I will say though that my first presidential election was 2008, and I did go to the Republican Party primary because there was this guy named Ron Paul, and I went, and there were two people from my precinct there, and I told the one guy, I said, hey, look, I'm a libertarian, I'm just here to vote for Ron Paul. And he was a McCain guy, but he was pretty cool about it. So I did that. So I guess I was a Republican for a day, and then I voted for Bob Barr when Ron Paul didn't make it through the primary. I didn't know anything about him. I just knew he was a libertarian, allegedly, and I was a libertarian, so I was like, okay, I'll check the box. But like, I definitely did have sort of influence on this. Like, I'm going to support Ron Paul. The Republican Party there's hope for them. Like, I did try to work it out but that just did not end up working for me.
I think Ron Paul is definitely the exception there, because people from all over the spectrum connected with him on different issues. And yes, there are issues with Ron Paul in the movement now, but you go back to 2008 and he was such an inspiration to so many people, from people on the left, from people on the right, from disaffected voters all over the place. Like, that's one that really just crossed party lines and drew everyone, towards the bottom of the spectrum. And it didn't matter whether you were left or right. He's definitely an icon for that reason, because he brought so many people. He's actually the reason I'm in the movement. Even though I came from the left, like my fiance, he was like, hey, you got to watch this Ron Paul guy. I'm like, what? No. But then I listened to him, and then like immediately I was like, he wants to privatize everything. I'm like, why don't we privatize the police? What would that be like? And he's like, whoa, calm down there. So now I'm an anarchist, and he's like a conservatarian now. Like, it's pretty funny. I went off the deep end with that.
Yeah. Well, they say being involved in the Libertarian Party for 6 months will make you an anarchist. I think it only took me maybe about 5. I think I might have been a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But like,
I think it was about 6 for me, yeah.
Yeah. Before I just like generically identified as a libertarian, I was like, yeah, just make government smaller in general. I would support that, privatize things. But yeah, then I got into it, and now I'm into it. And I don't. It's once again, it's not something I lead with, but like people in Burien know that I'm an anarchist. I don't try to hide it. I don't think everybody who's like filling my name in on the ballot knows it, but there are some people that know it. And yeah, getting an anarchist on the city council, wouldn't that be something?
Sometimes telling people you're an anarchist has a better effect than telling them you're a libertarian, because it gets them to go like, wait, what? Seriously? And it gets them to listen to you.
Well, and also it seems to, because in my race there's a conservative incumbent and there's 2 Democrats who I actually like. I like them as people. They're all right. They're pretty moderate, I would say. So like the hardcore progressives, some of them are kind of getting on board with me, even though they're like, well, yeah, you're a libertarian, you don't like taxes. That's a little goofy for us, but I guess they do like the anarchist thing. It does kind of play well.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as a more Hayekian anarchist, it's easier to pull people in with how you explain things, because it's not like a centrally planned anarchy. It's easier to explain like, hey, these decisions should be made up by the people who live in the community, and it's more of a community-focused anarchism. And I think that's easier to lead with, at least from my perspective, being from the same persuasion.
Plus, it's probably a bit disarming that they see you say the word anarchist and then they look at you and say, he's not, breaking windows.
Yeah.
Calling for
He's not Antifa, so wait, what?
Well, and I think the word anarchist has less baggage than the word libertarian, actually. So
Yeah, I bet it does, especially up there, because anarchism isn't such a foreign concept in the Seattle area, because you have these massive Antifa and ANCOM movements. So it's not like such a crazy thing to proclaim.
Especially in a political arena. Like if you're saying you're an anarchist and you're like, the context is you're like talking to a reporter on the street and there's a whole bunch of like fires breaking up behind you, that's one thing. But if you're an anarchist and you're like putting your name in to run for election and you're talking about like very reasonable observations you have about like city government, people kind of go, oh.
Yeah.
I think I remember this was, if you guys ever saw, Tim Allen was on some news thing, and he's sitting in and he's talking about how he's an anarchist, and like the edgiest thing about him in that context, he was wearing a leather jacket. Like, but it's still like people are like, oh, now? Like, well, I mean, that was like maybe a celebrity,
in, like, the 50s or. Later
yeah,
on,
but I mean,
the Fonz was on TV. Maybe that was edgy.
But I mean, like an A-list actor that's on like mainstream media wearing a leather jacket, that's a little more relaxed, and then he comes out saying he's an anarchist, and there was no real outrage around that. There was no like jumping to like oh, so you like literally believe like in complete chaos. It's like no.
Well,
it's
hey,
like,
if we're looking for a celebritarian to give the nomination to, then. Somebody to consider.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be above it. Like, I honestly don't know who I'm voting for, but...
Buzz Lightyear for president.
Oh my God. Could you imagine the memes? If Tim Allen was running for president? Oh my God. Like, all of the home improvement memes that we could make, all of the Toy Story memes we could make. Oh my gosh. Now I really want it to happen. I'm going to write him an email.
Someone is going to make this into a Facebook page.
Yes, I think I'm going to do it. Anyways, moving on. So kind of building off the political divide and how your surrounding area is mostly progressive leaning. What are some key issues that you feel you can work with Democrats and socialists on, and what are some key issues you feel you can work with conservatives on?
Well, I mean, with the Democrats and the socialists, I think I've talked about homelessness. I think I have a lot of agreement from them on different ways we can address that. Our city actually has a pilot program going on right now where we're sort of trying to offer homeless people services, but it's always like, here's the services, either take them or get out of our parks. And I've gone to council a couple of times, and I mentioned in the candidate forum, I said, look, what we're doing is we're trying to like walk the line between being like a rule of law approach and being a compassionate approach. And I think we need to like pick one side or the other and stick to it. And obviously I know which side of that I'm on. And in fact, I even called the progressives out. I was like, you guys are supposed to be progressives here. Why don't we actually start treating these people like human beings and, giving them free will? And another issue that has sort of come up is the decriminalization of drugs. Like, there's talk about a safe injection site, which I don't believe in spending taxpayer money on it, but I wouldn't be opposed to
find
one
some donors
just
for
existing.
that, though.
Yeah, exactly. So that might be a thing. There's actually another candidate who's running for a different position, Sydney Moore. The conservatives sort of nickname for her, she's like the safe injection site lady, but so it's not as big of an focus for me, but she has drug policy expertise, so that's kind of why. But I'm definitely on board with it.
Yeah, she sounds like a really good person to work with on drug policy.
Yeah.
Because, people may not like the whole idea of a safe injection site. Like, it's better than finding needles in your playground.
Yeah, well, and even without a safe injection site, a needle exchange is another kind of more moderate thing that's been talked about.
Yeah, and
we find needles all over the place. I was actually volunteering last week, and I found a couple needles at Transform Burien, which, some of those people come in there and they're under the influence of whatever, and we don't care. We'll serve them, Yeah. But giving them that option of like, hey, here's a place you can at least get clean needles.
Yeah, and I see that there's a lot of pushback from libertarians, at least online, on these kinds of pilot programs for drug addiction and stuff like that. But it's like, you don't have to fund it with tax dollars. You could just set up some kind of system on the city website, be like, hey, here's what we want to do. We want to provide this, 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 and this, but we need, volunteers to fund it. And you could set up all kinds of, voluntary donations for these kinds of programs and make them work efficiently while still being, provided by the government. And I think a lot of libertarians need to get more on board with those kinds of things because, like it or not, we have a story.
My state party, we actually in Seattle, there's like a drug users alliance or whatever. And anyway, I mentioned in one of my state party Facebook groups, I was like, hey, we should go to this, drug users group and just say, hey, we're libertarians. We support, your right to do whatever you want with your own body. And they were like, no, what are you, nuts? Why do you want to associate us with a bunch of druggies? So,
because they vote?
That didn't. Yeah, well. Just because it's their right,
because
and we
it's an association,
that.
So that probably means they have political ties. They have some kind of sway in the community. That would be a fantastic idea.
Yeah, well, I thought so. I mean, I might go to them and see if they'll endorse my campaign if I make it through the primary here. I don't know.
Would they not endorse your campaign?
I don't know if they do endorsements. Like, that's the issue. I don't know why they wouldn't endorse me. I mean, I'm wonderful. I don't know why anyone wouldn't endorse me.
You are very pleasant. Okay, so do you think, actually building off of that, do you think state and national parties could be doing more to help candidates? And what do you think they should be doing in the way of local politics?
I think, having been a treasurer of a state party for 2 years, and one of the things I wanted to do, and this unfortunately never happened, but my plan was at our state convention just to have a training on like campaign compliance for local candidates. But I think anything that's sort of like infrastructure of like how to run a campaign, Kara Schultz does those campaign strategy calls, and I've been on several of those, and I find those to be really helpful.
Those are wonderful. I was supposed to do one of those for social media stuff, but that just, I don't know, it didn't happen. But
there haven't been any in a while, have there? Or maybe I've just missed them. I don't know.
I haven't seen anything. So.
Like that type of thing, I think, but a lot of the groundwork has to be local. Like, the people that volunteer on my campaign, they're not generally libertarians. They're generally just people who live in Burien and want me on their city council. Which I think is good. I've seen the Democrats in our area, because they're such a powerhouse. They've come and they've taken a few like swing districts where it's slightly less progressive, like in like Bellevue area. And they've come in and they've said, hey, we're going to get people on the ground everywhere doorbelling. And that's kind of worked out for them. But, that's them essentially like reinforcing their supermajority that they already have. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's going to work for the Libertarian Party. I don't think we have enough people that even if we did target a specific legislative district or city, that we could effectively saturate it. So I don't...
Well, you're not going to get a majority of ideological libertarians, but you can get those massive groups of, one-issue voters or two-issue voters or people who just believe in you as a candidate. But yeah, ideologically, you're never going to get a majority.
Or I get people, like when people see my name on the ballot, because I was born and raised in Burien, which is a very good advantage when I'm out campaigning. Like, I've got people I haven't talked to since high school that send me pictures of their ballots. So like, hey, I voted for you, good luck. So,
nice. Yeah.
That type of thing, yeah.
You definitely have an advantage there.
And nobody, I think, from like back then knows that I was like the crazy libertarian. They just kind of know I've been involved in local politics and maybe a few of the things I've done.
Yeah.
Yay, the crazy libertarian.
I don't think I'd get too many votes from my fellow high school schoolmates. Let's just say we didn't leave on good terms. I'm sure the name recognition is a powerful tool, being a lifelong resident of the area. And
it's interesting because one of the candidates that I'm running against is also a lifetime resident, And he's a few years younger than me and went to a different high school. So, like, we kind of just missed each other. But when I heard he was running, I was doing my opposition research, right? I looked him up on Facebook, and we have like 30 friends in common. And so, like, I've met him, and he's a really nice guy. And it's actually kind of funny because he just filed to run against the incumbent, which is the only reason I filed. So, like, we don't have anything against each other. We get along pretty well. But it's funny that they're two lifetime residents.
Yeah. So, before we go, is there anything you want to plug? Do you have a campaign website? Do you have any social media profiles? Where should people go to support you?
Yeah, go to my Facebook page, Charles 4 Burien. That's the number 4, because I'm running for position 4, so that's a helpful little memory aid there. And Burien, Burien. And from there, you can get linked to everything else. Just like my Facebook page. I like having likes on the Facebook page. I don't care if they're from Burien or not.
So everybody go out and check out Charles's Facebook page. And before we go, make sure you check out Think Liberty on all social media platforms. Just search Think Liberty on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and any other platforms you use. And go to our website, think-liberty.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Think Liberty Podcast Network for almost daily uploads of new shows. Leave us a review and tell a friend. And whether you like it or not, we'll probably be back next week.